Ladies and gentlemen, good Shabbos. It's lovely to see you here this morning. We welcome you to our congregation. We want to wish Yashikov to Jacob and Rochelle, who are preparing for their B'nai Mitzvah. We want to welcome back Cantor Joe, who's davening on our behalf again this morning. And a quick shout out to all of you. And I think, Tamara, you're here back from college, so welcome back. Thrilled to see you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the middle of what is called the Yosef saga, which is the end of the story of Joseph. Many of you may have been on Broadway to learn the biblical story. What's it called? Joseph in Amazing Technicolor. By the way, the book is better. But in any event, you should obviously take the opportunity to follow along in our Torah reading, which is on page 250. We are introduced again to the idea of Yosef as the dream interpreter. And Yosef specifically says that he does not do this himself. It says, Biladai Elohim osa et Ela, that it is God who has the power of interpreting the dreams. Most importantly, as we like to say, if you love the verse from the book of Tehillim, which many of you know, Hine matov umanayim, Shevet Achim Gad Yachad, how wonderful it is for brothers to dwell together. This is not your portion. Because we see a continuance of the conflict, the rivalry, and the struggle between Yosef and his brothers. So just to put quickly in a chronological context so we know what we're talking about when we get later in the service, and I'll share a few words at that point, is that Yosef, as you recall, is sold into slavery by his brothers. And at that time, he was only 17 years old. He's 17 years old. He then goes and he serves in the house of an Egyptian named Potiphar. And according to tradition, he is there either 1 or 2 years. Most people say 2 years. You recall the incident with Potiphar's wife. Potiphar's husband comes back and is none too pleased and sends Yosef to prison, where he spends, according to tradition, 10 years. He then becomes viceroy of Egypt after having interpreted the Pharaoh's dreams, which we read about in this portion. And it will be 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. The 7 years of plenty go very, very well. We like to refer to Joseph as the first financial planner of Egypt. And so after those 7 years, we'll read today and we'll read next week also about his brothers then coming back down to Egypt, because we go into the 7 years of famine. So suffice it to say that when we begin reading today about the interaction between Joseph and his brothers, he is now 37 years old. He's 37 years old. And I want you to keep that in mind when you read about the interactions that they have. We're no longer talking about a teenager, a youth, but rather we're talking about someone who's 37 years old, who is also a person of tremendous power in Egypt. And so as you follow along the back and forth between Yosef and his brothers, I think the one thing we will see is that the phrase "Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad" is not as easy as it sounds. We invite you to follow along with the Torah reading. We are on page 250.